And we're on.
That
Hello.
was a quick intro. I don't remember it being that short. Oh, well.
No,
that's good, though.
I think that was the abbreviated version.
We can get right to it.
Yeah, hello, everybody. We have a very special guest, unlike our other guests, right?
How about we introduce ourselves first?
Yes, of course. They want to know who we are. This is Elise Chimako Carlson.
And that is Carl L. Johnson.
Yeah.
Everybody knew that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and it was a busy last weekend. I was at Warren Seekers of the Supernatural Conference at Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut, and they anticipated upwards of 5,000 people. That's phenomenal. One of the biggest, probably the biggest paranormal conference of the year in this country. Instead, they well over 6,000 people.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
People.
People were waiting in line for in excess of 2.5 hours. That was probably some people waited 3 hours. And at the VIP party on Friday evening, and then on Saturday, the main event, it took me 3 hours to move 10 feet. That's how busy it was and how popular our stands were and all that.
Did they have their haunted items out at the VIP party like they did last
I never got into the museum. I couldn't get that far. Oh, yes, they had the full.
So does anybody ever try to touch Annabelle?
I think people want to. I think people go like this on the glass, and it says do not touch. If you put "do not touch," danger. Of course, people are going to want to touch it. And the famous Annabelle doll, and she's cased up. And I had seen it all last year, but I saw people's pictures. I couldn't even get that far. I couldn't get 15 feet into the museum there, away into the museum. But I know it's there. Some artifacts I've seen before. But it was a very good experience. It was exhausting and it was, lengthy. And I was virtually fasting. I didn't eat supper for 2 nights. That's fasting or breakfast. Well, I did have breakfast on Sunday morning. Yes, finally. And it was just wonderful. The people I saw, Ryan Daniel Buell was there. And, oh, geez, who wasn't there? You weren't there.
I wasn't there.
You had family things. You had a perfect excuses.
I did have some things I had to do.
Yeah.
But we got to do an event as Panorama the prior week at the North Providence Library. We did a talk there.
Mm-hmm.
Just talking about what the paranormal involves. And a lot of people ask questions about television. And you were telling them some of the traditional explanations for paranormal activity. And I was kind of...
Yeah. In a way, it was
coming in with my parapsychological.
The program was almost like a standard lecture about the introduction to the paranormal investigation and research, but it was our own take on it, though. So a lot about. She explained the differences between parapsychology and paranormal. And paranormal is a very umbrella term, of course. You wouldn't say the parapsychology, but it was enjoyable. It was just they want us back soon.
Yeah,
so I was happy with that.
That was fun.
Yes.
So do you have anything coming up this week or weekend? I do not.
Well, I will be in Connecticut for an organization of which I'm a member there. But the person who is going to be elevated to another position, that's going to have to be in December because he can't make it, the guest of honor candidate. But
so if it's the beginning of November, that's kind of like the Halloween hangover, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
Everybody's been so busy during October and then ate all that candy to end the month. So
I've always found this a special aura about Halloween decorations and inflatables, especially the day after. They're just limp, and then the skeletons are still up, but it's like they're going to be down in a day or two, and it's like, wow, it's just an aftermath. So much preparation.
Pack them up, bring out the Santas.
Yeah, they've already had Christmas things out since the beginning of October anyway in some of the stores, most of the stores. So what are you going to do about that?
All right.
Yeah. So we have a guest tonight.
We have a great guest tonight.
We have a great guest. We actually have, even in our array of guests, which are always exceptional, this guy stands out. He is a world traveler, and he brings people to his travels. And they're not just a regular itinerary of go see the sites, go see the pyramids along the Nile. He takes a unique slant. He looks for portals and conduits between dimensions and everything, because he's Mike Ricksecker. He's a talk show host, journalist, author, and one could say if he has a specialty, it would be the enigma of shadow persons, and that's why he is often consulted. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for being with us.
Welcome, Carl and Elise. Thanks so much for having me tonight. Absolutely appreciate it.
Yes.
And Carl, it was great to see you at the Warren's Paracon this past weekend, because
yes,
it's been a little while since we we'd seen each other.
I know. So we can go a couple of years without seeing each other. We don't, I never mean it to be, but that does happen.
It happens. Yeah.
Like we're always, we'll get together. We got to do this in a few months. And then 2 years later, oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm always looking to.
Yeah.
You may be in Rhode Island, in that area, Northeast, a little bit more than you have been anyway.
Yes, a little bit more.
Yeah. You haven't. I think you've invested in real estate out there, so to speak.
To speak, yeah. Well,
personal interest.
I have a significant other out in that direction.
The commodity.
So, yes.
Yeah. And that will motivate you to come, and hopefully we can hang around more. Unfortunately, I can no longer bring you to Slater Mill. I mean, I can do what we did last time. I can bring you to the exteriors, but I can't get in the buildings as I did before. We can take
which
a
is
tour
unfortunate.
there. Yeah, that's a bygone era. It was so magical at the time, because in one of those buildings, and it's unique, it lends to its authenticity, that every building of the three on the campus had or has their own ghost. And in the Stone Wilkinson Mill, which was built in between 1810 and 1811, opened in 1811 as a machine shop and service station for the Slater Mill operation, there was a resident shadow person. And I had seen him I'd seen it several times, and it was there, and many other witnesses to corroborate. So, I mean, it really has a shadow person in there.
So I guess we're getting right into it. Never mind where he came from or what else he's doing. We're getting right into the shadow.
Right into it. Yeah.
So, Mike, why don't you tell us what a shadow person is, could be, might be?
Yeah, well, I have a whole hour-and-a-half presentation on that. So
I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the funny question. Okay, what is a shadow person? And there's not really one simple answer for that. I have found in my research over the years that a shadow person could be a lot of different things. They could be a human spirit who can't manifest as an apparition at that particular moment. They could be an extraterrestrial of some sort. They could be an ultra-terrestrial. They could be an interdimensional being, which would be similar to an ultra-terrestrial. They could be an astral projection or a light being that we're seeing at a different wavelength. There are a lot of things that these entities could possibly be. What I tell people is, depending on your particular shadow that you're experiencing, you will probably have to do some additional research into this phenomenon, whether that be a recurring experience that you're having in the home, or if this is at a historic building that you investigate routinely. You might have to kind of focus on that area to try to figure out what it is. But these entities can be a lot of different things.
Between the different reports you hear, of course, all these investigations start with a report from a living person. Have there any commonalities been found between reports of seeing a shadow type person?
Well, I mean, between you'll have like a full humanoid figure, and that will have a lot of things in common to, say, the ones that wear the hats, because the ones that wear the hats appear as a full figured being, just wearing a hat, sometimes with or without a jacket or a cape or something like that. You'll also see these wispy type ones that seem to have a bit of a human form to them, but are very translucent and very, very fast. So it's very hard to see them, but they still have some characteristics that would be in common with, like, your regular humanoid figure. But then you have other ones that are just what we might call the mist or the rolling black smoke. I know Carl has seen the shadow smoke, and those are more amorphous in nature and quite different. But yet we would still classify it under some sort of shadow phenomena.
I've told people, when I've been asked about what is a shadow person, what do you think about them? Are they ghosts? Are they demons? What are they? I say, what I can tell you about shadow beings is that they throw out the window everything we think we know about spirit and apparition research, about ghost hunting. They just defy all of that. We think we've got it down. We think we have some MO for these insubstantial beings, and yet the shadow ghost, it's, you know, it doesn't do the same thing. Sometimes it does, but they don't, they look like people in outline, in silhouette. So
Mm-hmm.
what's up with that is, you know, you have some ideas about maybe they're a ghost that can't manifest at that moment fully as what might be called an apparition or a visible spirit. Are they menacing? Are they evil? Are they're not beneficial? They're not angels. They just are. I think
Yeah.
some people dread them because they are so mysterious and defy explanation and definition.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we tend to fear what we don't understand. And this is what I tell people, you know, and it's kind of simplistic in nature, but what I say is, you know, you take humans, some humans are good, some humans are bad. Thing with shadow people. Some shadow people are good, some shadow people are bad, but for the most part, they're rather benign. They fall somewhere in between, neither good nor evil. They're just many of them are watching, standing, observing, and you know, kind of makes you wonder as to what their ultimate agenda may be. You know, are they, you know, some sort of you know, just data collector, some sort of scout?
Right.
You know,
Now, do you find
we
that
don't
a lot
know.
of people report them as being black, and that tends to have people think that they're evil because they associate
Oh,
black
sure.
with evil?
Yeah, yeah, of
That
course.
it's a black
Black,
shadow.
black gets associated with evil. Many times they're seen at night, and so, but you can see them during the day. You know, people see them full daylight. You might see them out in the woods, in the backyard, or just you know, walking across a room, and all the lights are on, and there it goes. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things people associate it with black. We fear it. We don't understand, and you know, you take something like a yeah, like okay, the hat wearing entities. You know, a lot of people chalk these up to one, you know, some of the more nefarious kinds. You know, some people believe that they may be some sort of energy vampire that come into the room at night while you're laying in bed, and they strike fear into you and they feed off the fear. Well, okay, that might be some of these, but you know, then you have an interesting story like Albert K. Bender, who founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952. Within a year, all of a sudden he closed up shop, even though it went international, and got to be a very big organization within a year. And several years later, he wrote a book and he explained why, because everybody, you know, just didn't understand why he, you know, kind of bowed out. And what he said was he walked into his bedroom one night and through the wall materialized these three dark, shadowy, hat wearing entities with glowing eyes and smelling like sulfur. Well, I hear the story, you know, coming from a paranormal background, and I'm like, oh, these are the hat men that, you know, we always routinely hear about when we talk about shadow entities. Bender said that no, these were actually extraterrestrials, and they had warned him off of his research. He went on with this whole story about you know, they were harvesting resources from Antarctica and all this other stuff. Other people hear that story and they say, well, no, these were the men in black. And it's almost like we are, you know, we have all these different names and
Mhm.
ideas about, you know, the same thing. So are they really all one and the same? You know, perhaps.
well, to get back to the entity that we encountered, and I wanted to show you, but we didn't at that time have access to that mill, the Wilkinson Mill,
Hmm.
which lodged the shadow person. That shadow person was known to move things. It gained in momentum as I was there longer and, you know, tried to speak to it longer. I think had something to do with it. I would bring a group of well, ghost hunters for the our evening tours. I would bring them into that mill, and I would say something like, uh, "We have brought women and young folk into your mill. I realize that's a violation of mill protocol. So if you want us out of here, just do something, give us a sign, and we'll leave. We'll leave anyway. We'll just leave sooner if you give us a sign." Two times when I said that, a heavy spike, which was on a workbench, flew across the room in answer. And I said, "Well, folks, let's clear out because we're going to keep our word." And
Yeah.
for years, I had people who remembered those two instances where they would come in and tell me, "Yeah, I was here when that happened." And also, I think it played a little trick on Elise when she was downstairs. I had to go get some more equipment out of my vehicle, and I said, "Elise, would you mind waiting down here in the water wheel pit?" So she was there, and closed your eyes and for a while, and the light was off on you.
When I opened my eyes up, the light had gone off.
So I associate
I was
that
trying
with
to
that.
hear better
Yeah.
by closing my eyes.
I associate that activity with the same entity. I think it did shut off the light on Elise. I think it did throw their spike a couple of times because I would converse with it. It became a lot more friendly and appeared more after I started tossing little glass pebbles into the water wheel pit as a, like paying the ferryman over the river Styx. I said, we're going to give it a token. We're going to pay a toll to the person who oversees this mill. And then people started seeing it more.
Yeah, the park ranger that has to clean those out isn't going to be happy with you.
No, part of the subject, but their memories. So you said you used the term ultra terrestrial. Could that be equated with shadow person?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, an ultra terrestrial, we're talking about, something that's indigenous to the planet Earth, but is basically entering into our dimension from another plane of existence. So, people think of extraterrestrial, so a being from some other planet, but this would be from our planet, just on another plane that we don't normally see with our own eyes. And so they could be traversing in and out of that plane of existence or that dimension, but they could be natively living here as well. So yeah, that's absolutely a possibility.
It's just remarkable that they would even be at all anthropomorphic at times, looking the shape of people, and sometimes be clothed, cloak and hat kind of thing. Now, the one I encountered in the house in Harrisville that they now call the Conjuring House, that seemed to be like a shadow thing without form. It was just spread out. It was everywhere in the room and yet no one place at the same time. But it needed to seek egress to move about the house. It would go down the stairwell, seep underneath a door. It didn't just like osmosis come through a wall. So that was an interesting propensity or limitation it had. It
that's
be there.
That is kind of interesting because Andreas has also talked about seeing the smoke there, and it had to slip under the door. Now I've seen, not there at the Harrisville house or the Conjuring House, but at Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois, where we saw the shadow smoke coming down the hallway. At first, we thought the place was on fire, but we didn't smell anything. It's coming closer and closer. And it kept doing something very unusual. It would start creeping up the wall on the right-hand side of the hallway and creep back down, creep back up. All the while it's coming closer and closer. One of those times that creeped up the wall on the right-hand side of the hallway, it morphed into the apparition of a little girl. So then it became this moment where instead of, shocked at seeing this shadow smoke rolling toward us, now we're like coaxing this little girl to come closer and closer. And she stopped at this one particular doorway. And what was fascinating about that was within that room of that doorway where she stopped at, people over the years had claimed to have seen a little girl in that particular room. Now, I'd investigated there many times, had never seen the little girl before. And we did EVP sessions and things like that in there and didn't really get much, but other people had. And so there were trigger objects in there like teddy bears and other things. But now we finally got to see her. And there were 5 of us that actually saw her, but she came out of this rolling black smoke.
That's interesting.
And there's your theory about perhaps they can't always manifest at the time, or your supposition that maybe.
It totally it totally solidified that that particular idea for me. But and it also is when people, we were talking about it earlier, thinking they're dark, menacing, evil, that sort of thing. I there's no way, shape, or form I'm going to call this little girl evil because just because she came out of rolling black smoke. Most people in mediums have interacted with her in the past, and basically she's kind of a little girl that's lost and forlorn. She's waiting by the window. Usually is where they see her, is by the window there, waiting for somebody to come pick her up, and whoever was supposed to come pick her up never did. Yeah, which is really sad. But I've had other stories over the years that have been related to me. My friend Kat, one time when she was in Ireland, she was exploring this abandoned abbey, and she'd gone up into the tower. Her sister decided to stay down below. She didn't want to get up into this abandoned building. And so she's watching Kat walking back and forth within the tower, and she saw walking behind Kat this dark, shadowy, hooded figure. Kat didn't really see this figure at that time. She was just walking around exploring. But when she went to go down the stairs, she slipped and fell, and a hand reached out and grabbed her, and it was this dark hooded figure that
Hmm?
saved her from falling down the
Wow.
stairs and crashing and maybe breaking a leg or something like that. So, you think about, okay, this is an old abandoned abbey. You've got a hooded figure. Yes, it may be dark in color, but we're talking the monk here, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that makes the most sense.
Yeah. And it helped her. It didn't, someone
Right.
else might have had the attitude of, oh, I was walking along and something pushed me down the stairs
Yeah,
rather than, something reached out to help me from falling down the stairs.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
How could we invite a shadow entity? I mean, is there any way to beckon them? I'd like to sit one in a chair, or we'd be sitting there.
Just interview. Yeah. What
Interview
exactly
this
are you?
thing.
Yeah,
Just like if you give us 30 seconds, we'll be content with that. And the
exactly.
shadow person in that mill I mentioned, the stone mill, did manifest for 30 seconds. And
Mhm.
that was remarkable. It walked by a couple of times and occluded the light. They have an opacity to them too, at least while we're looking at them.
Yeah.
So where they go after, where they came from, we don't know.
So I imagine there are reports of and descriptions of these kind of entities around the world and in different cultures.
Oh yeah, and you find those reports that go back into throughout history, thousands of years. And one of the fascinating things that I have found is that you see very very similar reports from cultures all over the world that were not supposed to have been connected, reporting on the same phenomena for thousands and thousands of years. And so you'll hear in a lot of cases it's related to the phenomena of old hag syndrome. So they'll
Yeah.
you'll have one culture report on the old hag, another one call it the dark presser, these sorts of things. And so they might call it something a little bit different. They might have some legend and lore that go behind it, but they're all talking about the same phenomenon. Or you'll see the the idea of different parts of the soul. Like in ancient Egypt, they
Right.
had multiple different
Yes.
parts of the soul. One of those was the shadow, which would remain here on Earth after the rest of the parts of the soul went on to the constellation of Orion. But we see that in our Native American cultures too. Now, depending on the tribe, they each have different beliefs. But there are ones like the Choctaw that also believe in multiple parts of the soul, and one part would go on to the land of the ghosts, while the other, which was the shadow, would stay here on Earth, just like the ancient Egyptians. So you see that too.
Actually, that was what I was going to ask you about, is the Egyptians, but we have a question on the screen
Yeah.
first. We have many child spirits here. A few have been frightening. Several are just children playing tricks or just wanting to be seen. One is scary and very mean. She is gone now.
Yeah, it was.
That's interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. Can there be bad children spirits? And then again, there are the black-eyed children, which somehow seem related to the shadow entities.
Yeah, black-eyed
They were
children.
kind
Well, and
of-
people do ask me that, are the black-eyed children related to shadow entities? And I think they're only related in the fact that I believe that there's some sort of interdimensional being, which I believe a kind of quote unquote true shadow person is also an interdimensional being, but a different species of interdimensional being. If you look at the characteristics of black-eyed children versus your classic shadow person, for one, black-eyed child is fully formed. You see all the features where shadow person, is very dark. You don't really see eyes and nose, mouth, that sort of thing. Where black-eyed children, I mean, you see the eyes are black, but you also see all the facial features. The clothing, while very drab, is also detailed. They talk, which
You're
shadow
ringing the
people.
doorbell?
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah, they ring the doorbell.
and you answer the
Yeah,
door.
they're
There they are.
exactly. Yeah, a shadow person doesn't ring the doorbell. They'll just walk right in. And that's another thing is that black-eyed children have to be invited into the house, where a shadow person can just
Already
manifest right in the middle of your house.
Yeah.
So they're different, but I believe related in the sense that they're both some type of interdimensional being. Now, as far as like a trickster child spirit, that sort of thing, if they had been a child, in life, and they had maybe that was their personality, that they like to play tricks and be mischievous. And usually, the characteristics that you have in life, you carry on with you into the afterlife. It's kind of like when we talk about, people will think that they have a demon in their house, and I know, Carl, you've dealt with this thing and or these types of things, and it might not be a demon; it might just be a nasty human spirit that they were a jerk in life and now they're a jerk in death.
Cranky uncle.
Yeah, it's funny how that's not always transcended, A jerk in life, a jerk in death. Ornery in life, ornery in death.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many like boundless questions we can ask you. And I don't know, you have some, but you have more supposition than answers about the shadow person because they're a very elusive phenomena.
Here's a question that not just black shadow people. Why do ghosts tend to present in a full spectrum of colors, such as the brown lady? Do shadow people resonate in a particular energetic range? Has anybody ever gotten a reading off an EMF detector in a shadow?
Yeah, with some of the different colors, and it's interesting, like the brown lady, and that's based off of a photograph. The brown lady of Raynham Hall.
Yeah.
Blue
lady in California, but that was just a blue dress.
There's some blue ones. There's some, of course, the white one's the most famous. When you get gray ones and things like that, and I almost think it's how, because we're talking about light in different spectrums of light and how powerful that may be manifesting. I mean, some of these spirits show up just fully formed. They look like just you and I, and people realize later, oh wait, I was actually just talking to a ghost or a spirit, somebody that wasn't that was already dead.
Take a while to catch on to that. Now the spirit I used to see, I saw her all of 4 times, and back in my parents' house, probably my favorite ghost because I saw her multiple times. I don't know if I'd have the capacity to see her now, being that much older, but as I remember her, she was colorless. She was rather monochromatic, but she was not stark black and white. She was, if anything, kind of a muted grayish brown, very muted in color. But I don't remember her skin tone being flesh colored. She just, her own thing. Perhaps she was at a wavelength that did not project colors, like the shorter wave of blue, the longer wave of red. She just was, and all those lines, those waves in between. She was just there, but she definitely appeared to be a living person. Just something different about her. The vintage clothing, the fact that she didn't speak, the fact that she glided across the floor. So it showed me there was something different about her. Her vanishing too, that was a clue that she was a ghost.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. When we saw that little girl, I mean, there were, like I said, there were 5 of us that saw her. We all saw her a little bit differently, but for the most part, we all saw her as, more of a whitish color, somewhat translucent. She wasn't fully formed. And what's interesting is, like, I saw her fully formed from her head down to about her knees, and she started to dissipate away, while others saw her fully formed at the feet, and then like toward the head, she started to dissipate away. And so, I think that has a lot to do with not only how our eyes function, but also our personal energy resonance and vibration. And how the human body resonates within a frequency range about 9 to 16 hertz, and everybody resonates a little bit differently. And then you also have this entity in front of you that's resonating at a little bit of a different frequency there. So how does my resonance interact with the resonance being projected from this entity before us? And so we're each going to pick up on that a little bit differently.
Right. That's quite an experience that you had 5 of you seeing something at the same
That's
time.
very rare.
And rare that
Yeah.
somebody would see feet. A lot of people
Yeah,
don't see feet.
a lot of people don't. Yeah.
When you think you'll think about it later. That person didn't have feet; they just kind of glided.
They're just there. Yeah. I don't know if
Mhm.
it's, there could be tons of explanations. Either that feet weren't there, or you're just surprised. And as humans, we focus on faces. We don't focus on feet.
Right.
So
Yeah, some of us do.
if you're surprised.
Yeah.
That
That reminds me of a certain magic mirror, or a mirror that cast anomalous reflections, and that is housed in Round Top Farmhouse at the Conjuring House. It's a very strange mirror. Mrs. Perrin, Carolyn Perrin, had an experience in the early 1970s with that mirror. Or that room, I should say, not particularly that mirror, but the mirror was in that room at the time, where she seemed to have a trans-dimensional experience, an encounter where she walked into that room, which was then the kitchen, and there were two men seated at a table, and they had pewter tankards they had dressed in clothing of another century, and those two shadow, whatever they were, those two beings, apparitions, what have you, they noticed Carolyn Perrin. They looked at her with astonishment, as if to say, "Who is this scantily clad female here?" And she looked at them. So for those moments, Carolyn Perrin was the ghost to them, and she,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, that is a really fascinating story. And so to me, that was some sort of time slip. You had two moments in time resonating at the same frequency, and she happened to see them, they happened to see her, and both of
yeah,
them, they were seeing each other as ghosts. And um you hear of some different cases like this, like the
I've heard of that
Versailles,
in other parts
uh
of the world.
yeah, like the Versailles time slip in Paris. There was an interesting story that I collected here a couple of years ago now, where um, it was related to me as a shadow person story, but also as a doppelganger story, which is kind of interesting. And basically, what happened was um, this this gentleman, when he was a small child, he had walked into the kitchen of his house one day, and there, standing by the kitchen table, was this tall, dark, hooded figure. Scared him to death. He ran out. Well, years later, he's in the kitchen. He's at the table. He's making a sandwich, and he looks toward the doorway because there was this shadow that walked into the room about the height of a child, stopped, and then boom, took off right back out the door. And he realized, oh my gosh, that was myself. And when I was younger, I walked into the room and witnessed myself at an older age. So it's interesting because
definitely.
you got three things going on there. There's shadows is the way they're appearing. So that's the way this was manifesting in this scenario. You could say doppelganger because it was himself, but it's also some sort of time slip where you had him as his younger self, whatever year that was, and then him as an older self in that kitchen, those moments in time bleeding over into each other.
Yeah, that phenomenon was woven, I thought, very artfully into made for TV movie, a version of Wuthering Heights, the English novel, where the main character, Heathcliff, early on, he sees, well, they show he and Kathy as children playing in the moors in England. And for a moment, young Catherine glimpses the older Heathcliff, the adult Heathcliff, just for a moment, and he's glowing there. And you tend to forget about that as the teleplay goes on. And towards the end, Heathcliff, who's becoming more and more obsessed with the spirit of Catherine and trying to reach her, he's looking to a cave in Penistone Crags where the two children used to play, and he sees the child Catherine. So then those two moments connect. There's the beginning of the story and almost at the end of the story, boom, and they have like a noise of, and so people have experienced that. To portray that in the movie, the other people knew about that. The writers must have heard of that happening. And the mirror in that house, in the Conjuring house, I had that unique experience where Corey and Jen Heinzen had the closing in June of 2019, the closing on that house. They were there for 3 years. And I walked in there. They invited me because of my history with the house, and I brought Elise, and I looked in that mirror. I was alone in that room that used to be the kitchen, now is a parlor. I said, "That's the same mirror. I think Norma Sutcliffe had that there, and I know the Perrins did, and it's probably been there all this time." I haven't looked in that mirror in what, nigh on to. I'd been back to the house, but it had been at least a decade. So I went over and looked in that mirror, which was there when I first went there in 1973, and I saw myself as I looked in 1973. I mean, it was uncanny. This wasn't like a snapshot or a video. This was me. My reflection was moving with me. I had my present day red polo shirt on, and but I had shoulder length reddish blonde hair, and I just looked much younger, and and it was uncanny. I had sideburns. I mean, I was me in 1973, and I said, "This just can't be." I started to call for Elise and Corey, and I said, "I am sure as soon as they enter the room, it's going to stop." So
Yeah.
what I did was for the next 3 to 4 minutes until they started calling for me, I just memorized it. This is not a trick of the light. It's sunny outside, but I am seeing this, and I will never forget that I saw this. It's not an illusion. It's not hallucination. And of course, as I like to say, I saw myself in the full length mirror of the bathroom. It's like, oh boy, yeah, there's been a change. And I said, but it was driven home to me,
Yeah.
because I was actually seeing myself. I have not been able to replicate that under any lighting conditions, but it was real. And you had something of an experience.
I tried working on that when you guys were in the house, and I was downstairs waiting.
What'd you get?
Did you?
I just kept staring at that mirror, but nothing changed. Nothing changed. All the activity was going on with you guys.
Yeah, we were when you were filming your documentary, Shadow Dimensions, in the house, and she was looking at the mirror. But you did have something that same day. You said your features were somewhat distorted. It's not that it's not that you were looking at your younger self, but something happened.
With me?
Yeah, didn't you? You said your features.
No, I really didn't have, not with the mirror. My incident.
I know you did have an
experience
there.
Yeah, I did have an experience while we were filming the Shadow Dimension, and so yeah, I was interviewing Keith upstairs, and as he was telling his story about the window, I started getting really, really lightheaded, and I'm there by that interior window in Andrea's old room, and I held out. I was able to hold myself together until he finished his story, and I was like, "Great, can you take the camera from me?" Because I had to sit down. So
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, I was definitely feeling the energy in that room in that moment as Keith was telling the story. And what's also interesting is when I did a photo sweep of the house later on, I got this really, really interesting photo that I call interdimensional phasing, because as you're looking from the center bedroom into that particular room where I felt lightheaded and Keith had the window incident, and that was Andrew's old bedroom. Everything in the foreground is static. It's perfect. It's as it should be. The bed, the chair, the bureau, all that. But then when you look through that door, everything from like that doorway and that interior window and beyond is transitioned to the right. And the exterior window beyond that would be behind the wall between the two rooms. You can actually see transition to the right through the doorway against the wall with the chalkboard, which is really, really bizarre. So there was definitely some energy going on in that room that particular day.
Is that potentially harmful? Would we have anything to? It's an eerie sensation when you feel yourself being pulled away. I felt that too. Probably not as profoundly as you did that day.
Yeah, because you mentioned feeling some things too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something. I become apprehensive when I've had such an experience. I don't want to suddenly find myself in another dimension or another time frame, unless I'm prepared for it. So, why are we apprehensive? Why is that scary? Do we really think we're going to go into another world, or is something pulling us into that other reality?
Well, something could be trying to pull us into that other reality, but that is, it is scary to think about because you hear about the legend and folklore, from like Ireland, to the fairy realm, where the fairies will come and pull you into
Yes.
another realm, another dimension, and you really don't know how long you're there. People will say, it's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and they come back out and they've been gone for weeks. So that's kind of scary to think about. And while, okay, people will try to pawn it off as, well, that's legend and lore. Well, no, people really truly believed in these experiences that happened back in the day. And while we say it's legend and lore now, it really wasn't. These things actually happened, and we've just kind of put a little spin on it these days to kind of do some storytelling. But with my research with the Alaska Triangle, just back in 2008, this is really recent, and this was reported in the Anchorage Daily News. There was a young boy who was found by some hunters, and he just kind of appeared in the area. There are no footprints around him at all in the snow. He's just standing there. And the one hunter went over there, helped him out, got him to safety, to the hospital, all that stuff. But the story that he told was that he was taken inside this mountain where there were the little people, and he met a young girl there who, the little people wanted him to interact with the little girl. She had been there for 40 years and had not aged. And after some time that they interacted and talked together, the little people, they called them the urchin hawk. That's the Inuit name for these. And they decided to return the little boy back to the real world, and poof, he appears, there on the mountainside by these hunters. And it's reported in the Anchorage Daily News. This happened. So where did he go? Was that some other dimension? Time worked differently. But it's the same type of stories that we find, 100, 200, 300 years ago, coming out of like Ireland and England. Germany has these type of stories. You find them all over the world.
Little people dragging you to another dimension. That is scary.
It is a scary thought when you're hiking in an isolated path, especially if you happen to be alone. And if you were traveling like to the British Isles, as you have upon occasion, it would have to be, but you're not alone at those times, but it would have to be kind of nerve-wracking. Yeah. Be walking along, and if you see a diminutive figure and they beckon you, you don't really want to with them. Brian Froud's Fairies book, the illustrations, that's evocative.
Or Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée. A lot of interesting stories in there about the little people, the fairies, and what have you from different cultures. And we see it today. Now you mentioned kind of out in the woods, walking along a path out there. David Paulides with his Missing 411. Some of these stories that you hear of people that they're just walking along the path and they disappear, and they're just not there anymore. Yeah. Some people have been found, and or they finally stumble upon civilization and save themselves. And the stories that they tell are really bizarre. They'll say things like, well, I heard a noise off to the side of the path. I took 2 steps off the path to go take a look. Didn't see, anything that was there, turned around to go back onto the path, and the path was gone. Yeah. So it was like the force swallowed up the path. And so it makes you wonder, okay, did they, were they transported somewhere? Did they fall into some sort of time slip? Did they walk through a portal? Were they abducted by ETs and just, had a loss in time?
Stories of people driving down the street that lose time after they saw a bright light. And, some similarities there. Oh, that is strange.
Case in point being Betty and Barney Hill and their alleged abduction.
Right. Yeah.
And I know people who have lost time while driving, and they saw an object in the sky. It was 2 women, and then they realized they'd lost. It was 3 hours they had lost out of their day, and they cannot account for it. I believe it. They had nothing to gain by telling me this, But I don't know if I'd be willing to even chance it. Like, okay, let me go. Let me spend the rest of my life in some other reality, and but who would know?
That's right.
The most unnerving story of that ilk that I've heard, and I don't remember where, it was a Midwestern state, it might have been Indiana, where a dad was mowing his lawn, and this took place in the 1970s, so it's not ancient history. Dad was mowing the lawn. I came out to call him in for dinner, and he wasn't there, but his lawnmower was still running, and his wife and children never saw him again.
Mm.
What makes it even more eerie is that several years later, they stayed in the house. Several years later, they heard his voice saying, "Hello, hello," where he had vanished.
Wow.
That's just as creepy as you can get.
It's in the Upside Down.
Yeah, it's kind of like straight out of Stranger Things. Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Wow.
I get a lot of their inspiration from real stories there.
They
Here's a
do.
question,
Absolutely.
That's talking about
What we got?
dimensions. If shadow beings are interdimensional, have you noticed a correlation with certain types of portal activity in the same area? Like in Egypt, there are stargates.
Like convergent phenomena.
Well, Sarah always asks some really good questions. She's
She
a part of
comes up with them,
yeah. She's a part of the Connected Universe portal community, and so yeah, it's interesting because that was part of the premise of the Shadow Dimension docuseries was going to places that had reported shadow activity, but also places that have reported portal activity to see if there's some sort of correlation between the two phenomena, see if they're related. And so I believe we did witness that there at the Conjuring House in Harrisville, certainly Mineral Springs. As far as Egypt, well, that's part of season 2. So you're gonna have to wait for that.
If anybody is interested, I do have a copy.
There we go. Yes.
That's very astute here.
I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry. I think we took it off of something else. But if you'd like to go to Egypt, February 7th through 19th, here's your chance.
Yep.
If you want to warm up in Egypt.
And no guarantee you'll make it back.
Yeah, well, you could be taking. Is that one of the talking statues? I forget which statue that is. I used to know something about the Pharaoh statuary in Egypt, and there was one statue that would, like, they called it the talking statue. It didn't really speak, but it would have a strange noise like a guitar string being plucked, bing, and every once in a while it would emit that noise.
Not that one. That's at Luxor, and actually there's 2 there.
Yeah, I've heard
that are kind of flanking that passageway. But yeah, it's going to be a fantastic tour. We get special access into the pyramid, some of the chambers that are usually off limits to the public. Of course, the Sphinx, a number of the different temples. There's a 4-day Nile cruise. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's actually a really, really good price for Egypt. You see some of these that are like $8,000 to do an Egypt tour, and this is like almost half of that. So yeah.
Wow. Trip of a lifetime.
Well, I'd like to bring Elise and go on that tour.
Come along.
Even get to Connecticut for 2 days this weekend because her family needed her for some things.
Yeah, it'll be a few more years
till bring the whole family, so that's not an issue.
There we go.
I always left out.
I want to go meet that lady too.
Yeah.
Salima Ikram, is that how you say her name?
I haven't seen her in so long, but I learned her name and then I forget precisely how she says it. Yes, you're such a composed man. You come across, Mike, as a journalist, and you are a correspondent journalist, but you talk about such creepy things.
Look, this is how many books he has. He has written quite.
Oh wow, yeah, and that's not all of them either.
That's not.
Those are all the older ones. Yeah, the 2 newest ones. A Walk in the Shadows, Complete Guide to Shadow People.
Actually, that has its own photo right
Oh, there we go. And Carl is in that one a lot.
Okay,
yeah.
He is.
That's right.
Then that's the most recent, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle.
Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. Yeah,
whatever got you so interested in Alaska, Mike? And there's a lot of theories that there are underground or remnants of underground civilizations.
Yeah. Well, I spent 3 years there when I was in the Air Force, and when the television show came calling, actually, it's kind of interesting the way that all worked out because they had actually stumbled across one of my videos that I put together on portals, and portal activity at paranormal locations. I talked about ley lines and things like that within the video, and they wanted me to talk about that. And when we just over the course of the natural conversation, they said, "So, what do you know about this, type of activity in Alaska?" And so I was like, "Oh, well, you guys are probably talking about like the Alaska Triangle. I spent 3 years up there." And they were like, "Yeah, actually, that's the name of the television show." So, so it worked out perfectly. Yeah.
Wow, that's
So
fantastic.
yeah.
What
So once I got
opportunity.
involved with the television show, it was like, well, I gotta. I'm a writer, so I got to write a book on this, and I'd spent the 3 years there and had experiences myself. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, because Alaska pulled you into mainstream media. You're known as and somewhat of an authority on anomalies in Alaska and all that. Well, it's an anomalous place because you got such long days and long nights that in some areas stretch to half the year.
Oh yeah, there's Alaska
why
is
Alaska? Not why because of you, but why the activity there?
Well, it has we call it the Alaska Triangle because it's like the Bermuda Triangle, but in Alaska. But it's the electromagnetism in the area. You have all these different energies. So like Bermuda, like the Devil's Triangle out there by Japan, you have Bridgewater Triangle there near you guys. And so what's going on is you have the magnetic energy that's coming out of the Earth's core. And as it passes through the Earth's mantle and crust, it's interacting with several different metals, minerals, water, these sorts of things. Depending on how much is there, what type of minerals are there, it's going to create different types of electromagnetism. So you have this in the U.S. Department of the Interior has actually measured this in Alaska. It was back in the 60s, but they defined 5 different magnetic characteristics up there. And some of them they actually defined as magnetic anomalies or negative anomalies. So, so you have that going on. You have seismic activity. There's a lot of earthquakes up there. The largest one ever in North America hit Anchorage in 1964. I was up there for a few. You have the volcanic activity that's there. Then, of course, you have the solar flares bombarding the area. That's why you have the Aurora Borealis, yes, the Northern Lights. And so it's just this fantastic cocktail of all these different energies up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which would make for some strange things happening there.
Mhm.
Submersible craft coming out of the ocean, coming out of glaciers or over glaciers. I hear there's aerial phenomena there, and these crafts, like in other places in the world, but more seem concentrated in that northern extreme that and of course the northernmost of the United States. These things appear overhead, and then they go. Where do they go to? Where do they come from? Are they submersibles? They're just around. There's a lot of UFO activity or strange craft activity, I should say.
Yeah, you're talking about an area of the world that is extremely remote. People don't realize that Alaska is 2.5 times the size of Texas, so it's massive, and it's that large, and the population up there is only about the size of the city of San Francisco. So there's and they're only concentrated in like some really specific areas like Anchorage, Fairbanks. There's some other Juneau, and then there's some other small towns along the way. So so you have a lot of remote land that's out there. The coastline of Alaska is larger than the rest of the coastline of the United States put together. It has 3 million lakes. So there's a lot of areas where extraterrestrial craft, UFOs, and things of that nature could hide. It'd be very easy.
Yeah. Wow. It's just hard to imagine being from Rhode Island and an area of land that huge,
Yeah, we'd be like a town with a market, and that would be our center of activity, something outside.
Bigger than the Amazon building, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unified field theory, Mike. Were aliens, I mean, I don't know if I would equate them with ghosts and spirits. Please define ultra terrestrial. I think you already did somewhat, but can you say anything more about what would define an ultra terrestrial? You said indigenous,
Yeah, indigenous to
not
Earth, but
necessarily space people or
right,
from
yeah,
another, planetary system, but something
right.
that's been here for a long time. What could they
Been
want? Why would they be here? Are we under surveillance, or are they just a natural or preternatural life form to this planet?
I mean, they may pre-exist us. You know, we could be like the aliens to them, you know, sort of thing. Um, you know, it's hard to know. I mean, they could be just another species. You think about this. We have, at least in our theoretical physics, we have up to 11 dimensions. Well, there
Yes.
may be, you know, other beings and entities living within these other dimensions. Well, let's say one of them discovered the ability to be able to, at will, travel those different dimensions, and they want to explore. They stumble across our dimension and wonder, oh, who are these beings? What are these, you know, creatures? And they may be, you know, watching, studying, observing us to try to learn more about us. And that may be where, you know, some of our, you know, strange phenomena comes from. Some of these shadows may be these ultra terrestrials from another dimension that are just, you know, studying us, or um, yeah, there's a lot of, we could go on with all kinds of different possibilities and examples,
Yeah.
and
Well,
you know, let your
Imagine-
imagination run wild, you know.
Right. Imagine if we found something on the moon or found something on Mars, you
Yeah,
know,
how
what
would we
do?
react?
Evidence that there has been intelligent life there. Mars is very bright in the sky now. It's like
Mhm.
it's like a shiny new penny, and it's close to Earth now.
We'd
So
explore it, we'd kill it, monetize it.
we infect it, virus,
Well, we
multiply
may have infected
quick.
it before and came here, so you know.
I think we'd be hiding in the shadows, just seeing what they're up to.
Yeah, well, there is some scant, not evidence, but suggestion that there was microbial life on Mars at one time,
Yes.
because a very interesting space rock that came from Mars was it has what looks like a fossilized paramecium in it with segments,
Mhm.
and you look at it and you have to think that's what it could be, but we don't know. I just don't know
Right.
how that could form naturally, but maybe it did.
This is a follow-up question to something we were talking about before, and actually I was kind of wondering the same thing myself. Was the kid that was found by the hunters reunited with his family?
He was, yes. He was
It's a
reunited with
happy
his family.
ending.
We always love a
Unlike the
happy
green
ending.
children, it's a happy ending.
Right.
You know?
Yes, he was reunited with his family.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So where do you go from here with your research? We know some of the projects you have forthcoming, and if you want to share them with us, please do.
Yeah, because I'm working on
After
Shadow
that,
Dimensions
let me know.
season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going on. I have the different tours, but of course, I am continuing to write. So my next work is connecting the universe, where I dive deeper into some of these different esoteric topics and connect them. So that's the Haunted Road Media site, which is outdated.
Yes.
But I would suggest people go to MikeRicksecker.com.
Okay.
So
Well, yeah. Well,
or ConnectedUniversePortal.com.
one thing that makes you interesting, besides these bizarre topics you delve into, is you present as everyman. You're a very normal looking guy with extraordinary
Well, thanks.
interest.
Am I supposed to look abnormal? I don't...
No, I mean, well, maybe an eye in the back of the head would kind of,
Who says I don't have one? My kids, my kids always thought I had an eye in the back of my head because I'd catch them doing stuff.
You look like a news anchor, you look like a White House correspondent or something. You look like, you could be one of those guys, and
Thanks.
and yet you go interesting places and talk about very enthralling subjects. Where's it going for you? Do you have I mean, you really need to live for 300 years, Mike, and bring more.
Well,
to it.
I've said I'm going to live till I'm 126 because I want to see.
Good.
I want to see the year 2100. I was born on the 21st, so I want to see the year 2100.
Yeah. Well, then you would outlive Jack Krebs by several years, by 4 years. He died when he was 120, or he lived to be 122, and we assume he died shortly after.
Yeah,
little big man, But there was a human being a lady in France who lived to be 122, and that's the oldest recorded person that can be verified, documented, and but I'm not aspiring to that.
I've already called it for 114.
114. Wow.
It occurred to me that I missed middle age. So if I want to call myself middle aged, I'm just gonna have to live to 114.
Yeah.
So I'm
there you go.
Middle-aged person.
Well, then again, H.P. Lovecraft was middle-aged when he was 23, and he just didn't know it. But he seemed to be an old soul.
Yeah.
You know, what do you hope to discover? I mean, wonderful things, yes, but wonderful things.
Yeah, the meaning to to life, the universe, and everything. Oh, that's 42.
Okay.
But you know, I mean, we're not going to be able to discover it all. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can and cover as many secrets as I can. Find some knowledge, some little nuggets of information here that we can pass on to the next generation.
Right.
And hopefully they'll pick up the mantle and take what we've done now to the next level. The humanity has this propensity to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. But maybe we can start learning, along the way, teach the next generation, and they can take it from there. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to uncover as much as I can while I'm here. The people that I read and study and all that, they laid the groundwork for what we are doing today. If you look at paranormal investigation, just from that, okay, we just did the Warrens Paracon. You had Hans Holzer, you had Harry Price. So these guys along the way that laid the groundwork for us as paranormal investigators. You look at Egyptologists, like George Reisner back in the day. You had what's I can't even think of the name now, began with a B, but the guy from England that laid a lot of the groundwork years ago, and we've kind of picked up the mantle from there as we continue to investigate.
So why reinvent the wheel every time you come up with some kind of an idea? Find
exactly
look at what they've already come up with, make a theory, use their theories to judge against new information that you find somewhere, and come up with another theory of your own and see if that one works. So,
Mike, I think go on.
No, I was just going to say that's kind of the challenge that we have in some areas these days, where there is a bit of a narrative that's been set by traditional historians or traditional archaeologists, where specifically with Egypt, when we talk about like the aging of the Sphinx and what the pyramids are for and things like that, there's a narrative that's been set, but it as other people keep looking into it, it's like, no, these were actually used for other things. These things are older. There was pre-Diluvian civilizations and things like that existed. Let's actually uncover those truths.
Yeah,
which has always been an interest of mine. I have a title for you. The Marco Polo of the Anomalous. How about that?
There we go. Sure.
Yeah.
I went across the world collecting stories instead of spices.
Yeah. I would like to propel this into a 2-hour show with you. Just.
Well, we'll just have to have another hour another time. That's
well, we'll definitely bring you back.
Yes.
Maybe not in
Absolutely.
2 weeks. Maybe.
Just let me know and we'll coordinate.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I saw, and you're a very easy person to go rabbit trailing with because you have so many interests and you've written about so many topics.
Yeah, I didn't even make much of an outline for tonight. I said we're just going to start chatting.
Because we know it will work,
It's just not going to follow. Yeah. And it is getting to be about bedtime for us older people.
Yeah, that's why I'm like trying to wrap it up with some closing notes here, though I don't want it to.
I do want to thank George Lopez for controlling things tonight and bringing up the pictures and making things move around, because sometimes I forget to, because I'm kind of wrapped in the conversation.
He pulls the strings.
So
thank you, George.
Orlando. Thank you, George. Yeah, very much. Well, Mike, of course, I wish you Godspeed on all your endeavors, and you're going to have some revelations. I certainly want to talk to you one-on-one or two-on-one, or
Absolutely, anytime.
And we'll do that in Rhode Island or closer to you or
and
whatever.
to everybody who tuned in tonight, thank you very much for your comments and questions.
Yeah, I try not to even
all of them, but as you saw,
fold into flow into other lines of conversation, like when you and I first worked on a case 12 years ago, and
yes.
but that you have to explain it all.
That's a long story. It's a very fascinating one, but we'll have to do that one next time.
We'll devote the episode to that.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much, and I'll be in touch.
And if everybody hasn't yet, make sure you subscribe to Full Spectrum on whatever channel it is you're watching here. YouTube,
however you found it tonight.
However you found us tonight. Bookmark it because they have a lot of different shows. I show almost every night of the week, a lot of different topics.
Yeah,
and interesting
fascinating array of people and guests and hosts. So Dead Air, Full Spectrum.
All right, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you both, Carl and Elise. Really appreciate it.
I wouldn't be surprised if you hang around a few minutes longer. And good night.